So tell us about the beginning. Go back to how things began. What was it that got the conversation started and got things going for the beginning of Indian Lake Christian Service Camp?
Well, the interesting thing about how it got started was just a few guys. We get together at the time we were renting a camp up in Pennsylvania. Jim Plunkett and Roland Stever, myself, and a few others. And for a couple of years, we just kept talking about the fact we need our own camp. Facilities we could design and programs we could develop. And finally, we asked a realtor in the church at Fork to look for some land and see what he could find. And different pieces we looked at and it didn't seem to appeal to us. And finally came up with the spot we now have in Darlington. And we went and looked at that piece, rugged, totally undeveloped, big rocks, lots of brush and trees and everything. And it just seemed like the rustic place for a nice campsite. So we chose that. We walked over. We had to walk clear down the, if you've ever been there, to that steep bank to the river and walk back up. And it was encouraging to think that we could develop this and use it for the Lord for camp. So that's how it all got started. And then from that point on, we contacted churches. And at first, it was a little slow getting the enthusiasm. And finally, one church after another would just indicate, we need our camp, we want our own camp. And they really got behind it. And we got the money and we started getting the plans approved and get the thing moving. We had two guys, never forget them, Oscar Segrist and Mr. McDonald. I don't know how old they were, they're 70s at least. And they came almost every day to work at the camp. And so when a group would come, they just loved working with those guys. They worked hard. Sometimes they worked hard and we were able to keep up with them and started developing the camp best we could. And it was just a great feeling all the way around getting ready for that first week of camp.
When things first got started, what challenges do you recall? What were the things that got in the way or made you wonder if this was really going to work out?
Well, at first it was hard to get a full staff for the weeks of camp. So Jim and I were usually there for all the weeks of camp when it first started. Either manager, dean, or some capacity for those first weeks of camp. And then we slowly started to recruit people from the churches who would come and who would get involved for the first week of camp. And when it came time for the first week to open, Jim was manager and I was dean. And we were so anxious to get going, but last minute things, the grass seed hadn't taken hold, so there wasn't much grass around. We had the well dug and so on. But when camp started the very first day, it started to pour rain. It rained every day in the camp season. There was so much mud, and because the camp, as you know, has some valleys and hills, we could hardly get from the cabins up to where the bathhouse was. We'd form chain gangs trying to get people up there sliding around in the mud, and then about the third day, the well went dry. So we're hauling water in from out of the area. The campers were having a ball, but a couple of the, we had a couple of grumpy, we don't tell you their names, the staff, they kept saying, we need to quit this and just go home right now. But the rest of them said, no, we're going to run this first week of camp all the way to the end. You know, when the years went by, that was the week of camp and getting started, that the campers and the staff looked back upon and said, you know, we didn't quit. And it was a good feeling at the end of the week. I mean, dirty, muddy, tired, but it was a great start to the week. The other weeks didn't have rain and we got the well going, so that was pretty nice for the rest of the weeks. But it just showed you the spirit that was going to be there for the camp all the way through.
What are some of the early blessings that you remember about once the camp got started and things got rolling, that you thought, boy, this is really going to be good and this is really working out with a lot of the goals that we had hoped to see accomplished?
One of the things that was good about camp was that we were able to get people from the churches who would come to work at camp now because of the location closer by. And when most people now were dean of the camp, they'd get a lot of the workers just coming from their church, so they could provide a lot of staff that were involved for the first time. The other thing was that from the very beginning, it just seemed like when you designed the facilities and had them the way you want them, you had more time to just do innovative kind of programming and changing things. And I noticed in the very beginning, one of the things that we had a great campfire area, and I think one of the blessings was that at the end of the campfire time, talking with the kids one-on-one, and then the people that made decisions. And even today, when I think back to camp, I know there are people, men and women, who were campers who made decisions and made commitments. And when I see them now, they'll talk about their time at Indian Lake Camp, and here they are now serving the Lord either full-time or they're very active in their local churches. But they talk back constantly, because they knew I was really involved with a lot of the weeks of camp, as to what those weeks meant to them and how it laid a solid foundation for them. So I think that was just one of the great experiences for us to see that it wasn't just a week of camp, but it's what it meant to the people as they were growing up later on.
Over the years, the span of time that you were involved with the camp, favorite memories, highlights, greatest successes along the way?
You know, I reflected back on the camp years often, and you have a lot of just great memories, but some of the things that really stand out are things when negative was turned to positive. I don't mention any names, but I remember specific situations where a kid would come to camp so out of control and so rebellious, whether it was for parents and church, and we would be mindful of that, and we would spend a lot of time with that kid. By the end of the week, quite often, I remember some very specific ones, when the parents would come to pick them up, there would be tears in the eyes of the camper, and going and hugging their mom and dad and talking with them about what camp meant to them, and then almost repenting and apologizing, and hearing years later how those kids got turned around. Sometimes kids would bring friends, and they'd bring friends that had nothing to do with the church. First day or two, I mean, they were so out of control, you almost wanted to call and send them home. But you thought, no, we have to keep them at camp. And so we'd, again, spend a lot of time with them one-on-one, and be interesting by the end of just 1 week, at the end of the week, they'd start to be asking questions about the Bible, questions about church. And again, sometimes we'd talk with the kids that brought them and find out that when they got back home, they started going to church. They ended up making a decision for the Lord and being baptized. And so I think the real heartbeat of memories was just seeing how camp was used by the Lord to take some of those negative experiences and turn them around. Even staff. Sometimes you start out a week at camp and you have the staff members that are so helpful and so positive, and you have some that for some reason they're just grumpy, complaining. By the end of the week, they come around and saying, you know, I realize now that I just have a basic nature to be negative. And this camp week has showed me I need to change that. And I'd be thinking, I always didn't say this to them, I'm thinking, you're right, you need to change it, but I'm glad you're seeing that and going to change it. So I think as staff, I was a better person because of spending the weeks at camp, even though it'd be hard work. But at the end of the week, just to know you had that privilege of being with the staff and the campers and the interaction there, I'd come back really revitalized, rejuvenated, thinking through my own life and ministry. I think those are the things that stand out in my mind as the really big challenges and just highlights of what the camp has meant to people over the years.
When you were beginning things, what were some of the initial hopes, goals, things that you would hope to see as a result of getting this camp started?
Well, I think, first of all, we were really concerned that we would have a week of camp where we could really have time for the kids to learn the Word, experience interactions with kids from other churches, be involved in a way that would establish them for that intense week, to make them think about who they are, even from the standpoint of the youngest kid, to know that putting God first and understanding how you treat other people for that week of camp, how you respect people. We wanted them to get a good view on just the whole concept of living the Christian life. Of course, it was different for the junior weeks, it would be for the senior high weeks, and also the difference they can make in their world. So we designed the curriculum so there'd be things that would be involved in that to help them understand witnessing at school, witnessing, and to work through some of those things. And like I said, there'd be a variety of kids at camp, and even dealing with the differences of the kids and being Christ-like about that. And just to see that week, intense week of camp could get them established in a way that they could really sense a foundation. We wanted them to like the week so they could look back on it as a part of a spiritual experience, not just a fun time. We try to make it fun as well. A good time, lots of laughter. We want them to look back as they would come. We were hoping they would start out the first week of camp and come straight through the whole camp program. And when they were done, look back and say, the camping experience in my home camp made all the difference in the world for the person I am today as a Christian. And I think we heard a lot of people give that witness, and that was when it's so worthwhile that all the effort that was done by so many people really accomplished that goal. And I think that's still a worthwhile goal today.